Hi, I'm Mike Maloney, and welcome to another CSRM podcast. Today's episode is hosted by Dr. Greg Linville.
Well, greetings, everyone, and welcome to another CSRM podcast. My name is Dan Stoffer, and I'm joined with a couple other staff members here. We have Scott Stedman, who's spinning our dials here and producing the podcast. And also, I am joined with Dr. Greg Linville, the author of the book Sent. If you've been a part of the series, you know that we've been going through this book, and this is a fantastic resource for you to just really explore what it means to be sent as a local church missionary. Sports minister is kind of what our focus is here, or even if you're a local church missionary, what we would call in some cases a volunteer. And so, Greg, we left off chapter 7 last time. We're going to dive into chapter 8. And we're going to talk about some of the applications of everything that we've talked about, including some of the para-ministries and sports chaplaincy. So catch us up to speed, and let's dive right into chapter 8.
Thanks, Dan. It's good to be with you and Scott as well. And yeah, we run the risk today of offending a lot of people. And these people are in the local church, and these people are in what we call the para-ministries. It's often termed para-church. We prefer para-ministry because we don't think that those people that are in those groups are not part of the church. We believe that they are part of the universal church. And so rather than being para-church like outside of it, they're in it, but they are para-ministries to the local church. And they can work hand in hand. Hopefully we can all work hand in hand, but we run the risk that we might offend some people today. And we want to start just by saying our intent is not to alienate anybody who is doing gospel work and who is trying to do what they can to bring all people around the world to a personal faith in Jesus. But once we understand a little bit about the uniqueness and how each is uniquely positioned, then we will be able to know better how we can work towards a mutual and cooperative way forward to reach those who are far from Jesus. So that's just kind of a foundation. So all of our brothers and sisters in FCA and AIA and YMCA and anybody else that has an A in their name, and even those that don't, Hockey Ministry International, they don't have an A in their name, but we're partners. And we would ask that you, if you're part of that para-ministry world, would have an open heart and mind to the kind of things that we're saying. But we also are asking local church people to have an open mind, because both groups within the church struggle to work together with one another. I don't know, Dan, Scott, you want to comment anything about that as a foundational salvo here?
I think that's a great explanation. And I think that Greg did a great job explaining our heart. And hopefully what we see would filter down to local churches and any of the para-ministries is that partnerships is what can make these things happen for sure. And I think when we work together, I know there's been other conversations, other podcasts where we've talked about this. We're way more effective in making dedicated disciples because we have different reaches, different areas of expertise. And I think really this is a great lead in to questions that are 8 for us to start.
Well, I think the overall is, what are we to actually bring people to a full spiritual maturity? And obviously that's going to start with a commitment to Jesus. Somebody has to say yes to Jesus. But then after they do that, what do they do? And I I just feel like I'm going to start hammering on the church a little bit here, because for me, the local church most often, not always, but most often tries to do what is coming across their desk or through their social media or whatever, and that is tend the flock. You know, the people that are already there are demanding the attention and effort of the pastor and the pastoral staff and the lay pastors, the Stephen ministers, and all of those kinds of folks. And so the question to the local church is, do you have a passion, and do you realize that you are sent, as in this book, to go reach those who are far from Jesus? And that's the first question that the local church has to ask, because when you look at your budget, that would tell you how much of your budget is spent enabling not only foreign missions, but local missions. How much of your time and effort is actually going into equipping and empowering and training and resourcing your local missionaries, those people who sit in your pews or in your chairs on a Lord's Day morning? How are you empowering them and enabling them to go as local ministries and missionaries? And how much of your financial dollar of your church goes to those things? Foreign missions, please do. And if you're looking for a foreign mission to support, CSRM has lots of foreign missionaries. They're all indigenous leaders all around the world. They need your support. Get involved. Yes, foreign missions, let's do it, but local missions as well. And so the question for the local church is, are you really, really committed to reaching those who are far from Jesus and far from the church? And then we move to the paraministry world, and the question is often answered, yes, we're sent. That's why we're there. That's why we're on the college campus. That's why we're on that doing the chaplaincy of that team. That we're sent. But the question for the paraministry then is, are you actually bringing those people to full spiritual maturity? Are you just getting them, as we've talked about before, just to say, hey, I like Jesus today, and we make a day's decision? Or are you going after a dedicated disciple? Are you just counting converts? Yes, they raised their hand, they filled out the pledge today, or are you convincing those who are confused, those who are conflicted, and convincing them about becoming a lifelong dedicated disciple of Jesus? And most paraministries are not equipped to do that. They're not set up to be the church. They're set up to go reach people and then get those people into a local church. And so if the paraministry is not doing that, then we're going to ask some hard questions of them. So you can begin to see it as an opening why we think this is really, really important. And so the questions are you really being effective at reaching people? And are you really being effective at maturing people? So where do you want to go with that, Dan?
Well, I think it's a good re-emphasis, because this is the heartbeat of CSRM. And I would venture to say it's the heartbeat of anyone listening to this podcast. It really relates to those relationships, and answering those questions lead to the ultimate goal. And that is to making a dedicated disciple. And really, it's what this book is all about. It's recognizing that we're all sent to help fulfill the Great Commission. And Greg, I know we've talked about this in previous podcasts, and if people are familiar with CSRM, they may know this term. But if not, and you'll see a graphic come up here, Scott will put that up. You mentioned the 3R model. So how does the 3R model actually help churches and paraministries and anyone listening to this podcast here achieve that goal to make a dedicated disciple?
The 3R model quickly is repetitive, relational, and redemptive. Redemptive meaning bringing people into a redemptive relationship with Jesus Christ. And it is often at opposition with the other main way of going about it, what we call the mega model. And the mega model has to do with reaching a mega group of people. And let me start there and then get back to the 3R model and share how these things really work together, or we hope after listening to this podcast and reading the book, people will grab hold of this. The mega model has been what has been the methodology within the sports outreach community for decades, close to a century. Mega meaning big, huge, great. And so you get a huge group of people together, and you get them together in one of two subcategories of the mega model. One is the mega event, and the other is mega media. So the mega event is the event where you get all of these people together in a stadium or in a gymnasium or on a field or wherever it might be. You get them together, and then you have an elite athlete or coach, typically an elite athlete or coach. It could be other people, but you get somebody to make a verbal proclamation, what we call a platform proclamation. They're standing on a platform, they're broadcasting. In the Greek, it's keruska, that we're proclaiming this gospel, and it is one person directly speaking audibly and somewhat visually to the whole group. Now that's morphed a little bit in our day and age, but this then bleeds between mega event and mega media, that it may be that it's now done through a podcast or a simulcast or some other kind of media that the person still gives their platform proclamation. Now, first of all, this is great. And there are people today who are followers of Jesus Christ because of that model, because someone got up in front and spoke this word, and many others organized and did all the organization of it that was needed. There's the second one is the mega media, in which you take the testimony, sometimes a literal not translation, but they take the notes of what the person said and they put them into a book, a magazine, a track. They record it, so it's audio or video, whatever it might be. It's still a mega proclamation. But then also the mega media can be lots of other things too. It doesn't have to be a platform proclamation, but it's still a proclamation of the gospel presented in different ways. And don't think that the mega approach is only tens of thousands at a stadium, but it could be tens of people, 100 people at the end of your youth league or adult league, and somebody comes into that 100 people and does that platform proclamation. However that platform proclamation is delivered to thousands, hundreds, scores, tens, and however it's done in person and media, it's all good. But if that is the only thing that is done, then we're very limited, because of what we said in previous podcasts. It takes 6 to 7 years for that totally unchurched non-believer who is secularized to come to a faith in Jesus. It takes them many opportunities of hearing and seeing and observing. Now, teenagers move through that a little quicker. They're quicker in every area of life. But it still takes at least months, if not years. And so if all you're doing is having a one-time hit, if somebody's been through that 6 or 7 years, then okay. But if they're not anywhere near that, then you're going to miss a lot of people. So therefore, the 3R approach, repetitive. Repetitive means at least monthly, probably more weekly, somewhat daily. there may be a few things that's daily, like fitness. I come into the gym every day for 5 days a week and take my fitness class or aerobics class or Zumba or whatever I'm doing. But probably more likely weekly that you have a league that you at best would be twice a week where you'd have a practice and then a game. And then that goes for 6 or 10 or 12 weeks. And then repetitive, you'd have to do another league and another league. So the repetitiveness starts to really see some progress after the second, third, fourth year. That person has been coming back week after week, month after month, season after season. The repetitiveness has an impact. And it goes back to what we said in some of our other books, that you first need to get them in part of our community, our sports outreach community. And so the first B is to belong. And then the second B is believe, that they believe after belonging to this league after these years. And then that's followed up with baptism and behavior change and becoming the disciple of Jesus. So you have these incorporations of the 3 R's in various ways in your local congregation. But then it moves to relational, that if they're coming every week to a league and no one in the church has built any relationship with them, then it's going to be limited as to what might happen. And so it's important that when someone just signs up for the league cold, that someone in that league builds that relationship with that person. It also enhances relationship that I'm a coworker with somebody. They will never come to church with me, a worship service, a Bible study, but they will come to the soccer league. They will come to the fitness class. They will come to any of these other things. So the relationship is two ways. The person who just signs up cold, that someone needs to form a relationship. And the other one is that it empowers our church people, our congregants, to be able to bring people with them. And then over the time, there is a verbal proclamation, a platform proclamation, if you will, devotions after every game, during every fitness class, etc. But there's also the verbal the living proclamation, where this person is saying, these people have something that I don't have. They're not perfect by any stretch, but they have a joy, they have a peace, they have purpose. What do they have that I don't have? And the relationship then allows for the redemption of their heart, mind, and soul, their very being. When they become a follower of Jesus, that actual redemption, that's the 3 R's. So let me go one step further, Dan and Scott, on this. What we have come to understand is that the mega model is a very crucial and important part of this. But when we understand its role and how God has used it and is using it more and more all the time, we can better integrate it into what we're doing. It starts, first of all, as sometimes a catalyst to grab somebody to get them involved. The professional athlete, I was at a gathering this summer of a couple thousand people, and Clark Kellogg, who has been a friend of CSRM's, great college professional player, is well known during the final 4 weeks for his massive influence on that, as in the media now. He gave one of the clearest, concise messages about the gospel that I have heard from anybody, calling people to come to Jesus. A couple thousand people there. That can be the kind of catalyst in which, if someone is there that night, and the relational part of it now starts to come in, the 3R start, that somebody says, hey, why don't you come and join our league? Hey, why don't you get involved here? Why don't you come here? So the catalyst, the mega model, can really be a catalyst to start people. And sometimes it can be the ending point of the first phase, that now these people have been involved in the leagues. They've been involved in this ministry for at least one season, hopefully many and many years. And then this person gets up and said, I know some of you have been here, but you've never yet said yes to Jesus. And so again, that platform proclamation can be the culmination of that first phase of getting somebody to faith in Christ. So we're not at all against the mega model, but we want people to help understand how it can be used, and used effectively with the 3R model. And the 3R model is great, but sometimes it lacks in being that initial attraction for somebody. And sometimes it lacks in actually calling people to a definitive relationship with Jesus at some point. Pick up on that, guys. What do you think?
Well, I have a question, because it seems like, and maybe this is my assumption, so correct me if I'm wrong. It seems like earlier we talked about the local church and how they weren't, in some ways, being very missional. They're kind of playing to the sheep in some ways. So I'm assuming that's how a lot of these paraministries kind of started up, because they wanted to reach people that the local church wasn't reaching. But it almost seems like now this paraministries, which again are supposed to work with the local churches, have kind of become their own entities. Am I wrong in thinking that way?
My experience is your way of thinking is exactly right, and I'll give you an example. Is that I have worked with a few of the paraministry leadership teams, and what they kind of sheepishly admit is that the only people that they can actually point to that would fit the criteria of a maturing, dedicated disciple are people that are on their own staff. In other words, if the people that they reach for Jesus, that the only way that their faith continues to grow and mature that they know of is when they join their staff. And in some ways, in that part of what we're talking about, the paraministry has become and functioning like a local church. That you reach that person, you bring them into your inner fellowship, you do Bible study, you do prayer enhancement, you do all kinds of fellowship, and teach them also then how to go and do outreach themselves. And so the paraministry has substituted itself for the local church. But there's a lot of other things that they don't do. The sacraments, there's all kinds of things that they don't do within that. And so, Scott, I think you're exactly dead on from my experience that most paraministries do not take the people with them, not just send them, but take them with them to a local congregation on a twice or three times a week. Yes, we're going to be there Sunday morning, and we're going to be there in the evening, and we're going to do some Bible study during the week. They don't do that. And the ones that have been honest with me say, yeah, that's our downfall. In fact, many of those staff admit to me that they don't even attend a local congregation themselves, because they're getting their own spiritual discipling done through their own paraministry. So I want to make 2 points here about this. One, CSRM is a paraministry. So don't think that we are anti-paraministry. It should be obvious that we're not, okay? But our goal is to equip the local church, to get people connected to the local church. I ask every paraministry leader to answer that question. What is your ultimate goal? And then the other thing that we need to understand from a biblical perspective is that Paul, Barnabas, Paul, Silas, Timothy, those guys, they worked in a paraministry role. They were missionaries. It's a paraministry outreach. and the local church sent them out. But what did they send them out to do? Not to go out and create paraministries. They were sent out to form churches, to plant churches. And so if your paraministry is not planting churches, or at the very least planting people within an existing church, then I don't think it's a biblical model. Again, I don't want to be offensive, and I'm open to discussion and someone to point out my illogic or my heresy, but that's kind of where we've been with CSRM.
Yeah, and if you want to challenge Dr. Linville, we'll put his email up here. No, I think
Absolutely.
this is a very healthy conversation. And Greg, I think you said it well. That's what CSRM is. We're a paraministry. And just a couple closing comments here before we wrap it up with final words. But Greg, I think we even felt this a few months ago. You know, we're trying to do these local regional roundtables, and they've been good, where we're gathering with local church sports ministers. We want to minister to them and help them and build our network, and have sports ministers build their own networks. And so these gatherings have happened, and they've been good, but the gatherings have been small, 5, 6, 10, 12 sports ministers there, and that's good. But then we invited some professional athletes to come and share. And correct me if I'm wrong, I think there was 60, 70 people. So to your point earlier, scores, and it was great. And we needed to hear from them. And they said some really good things. And so that kind of felt like, in some aspects, a mega model of a regional roundtable, where people we haven't had a chance to minister to came out and were a part of that. So there's some good things that you can do with that. I think what the challenge is asking the right questions, just like we just did in this episode, and then having a process in place. We talked about the 3 R's. We'll go ahead and have Scott put that graphic up once again here. And also, Greg, you mentioned very briefly the 5 B's. I think this just forces both the local church and the paraministry to think through, what are we doing here, and is it biblical, and is it leading people somewhere? When I think of the word missional, I think of a body of water. If it's just sitting and not moving, it's stagnant and it's filled with death, right? It doesn't smell good. Plant life can't really thrive in there, or I guess the wrong plant life, and fungus grows. Fish and everything else, they'll struggle. But when the water's moving, there's health, there's life. When the church, the local church, is moving to make dedicated disciples, when the para ministry is moving to make dedicated disciples, and better yet, when they're partnering together because they have different spheres of influence, better things are happening. And I think we have to ask the right questions to know that we are moving to fulfill the Great Commission. So we're a little bit late than what we normally do here, but any closing thoughts from you, Scott or Greg, before we wrap up this episode?
I have 2 that, just to tie a bow on this, and one of them is, we mentioned earlier, and we need to just kind of maybe end on this, and that is, what are some practical ways that we could unite the local church with the paraministry? And just think with me about these things. Perhaps baseball chapel is a paraministry. Let that be led and shepherded by a person, preferably even the sports minister in that church, that allows that person to then take new believers and maybe committed believers that are part of that baseball chapel group into their local church. And if you want to know about a great model, we have one for that. But rather than sending somebody in that can't connect them to a local church at all, have the local church and baseball chapel unite. How about a local church that would hire a youth ministers whose job is to be the FCA leader for the local high schools in their area? Or how about a local church hiring a singles pastor whose job description would also entail working with AIA on the college campus. Could FCA and AIA partner with a local church to help pay the salary for these people to do these things? How about a residential summer camp partner with a local church so that all of those kids or people that come to that camp that summer, can they go back and get involved? Or if a camp is residential and has summer stuff and it serves a denomination, what are the local churches that they're connecting the people that make decisions for Jesus that summer at that camp? And Dan and Scott, I think you both are involved in camps to somewhat, or they're big parts of your life in the past. How can we, in other words, think out of the box, people, and think about how we can partner. Parachurch, paraministry people, and I say parachurch so you know who I'm talking about, but what we say paraministry, go to the local congregation and say, can we do this? And the local church go to the staff person and say, we'd love to pay part of your salary if you come and join our staff and link these two things together. There's a lot that can happen here, folks. So the other thing that I would end with is, in every chapter in this book, there's a pioneer, if you will. And the one for this one was Robert Ross McBurney. And McBurney was the man who set the YMCA on fire in America. And he set the model. Now, unfortunately, the Y has not followed his model in more recent decades. But here was a very, very committed church person that used the Y to reach that person who was far from Jesus. Back then, it was only young men. But then, after that conversion, he took them with him to the local church. And that is why he's the model. And there's a lot in this chapter about Robert Ross McBurney. And they literally won thousands and thousands of people to Jesus and got them involved in the church. We got to combine our efforts, folks. That's my last word.
Said some very good practical things there. And I love the idea of shared staff and partnerships. So many churches and paraministries, we struggle financially, and we have all these amazing people we like to bring on staff. Let's get creative, not only for hiring staff members, but for helping to fulfill the Great Commission and being sent out. So that's all the time we have for today's episode. We sure hope you'll join us next time as we continue this conversation going through the book Sent. You can purchase this book through our website. Go to csrm.org and just look for our online store. We encourage you, as we always do, to grab this book, read it, invite others to read it with you, have some conversations, join a regional roundtable, reach out to us if we can help you start one and or join one. If you're a pastor, would you share this with your eldership and your leadership and your volunteers, or what we call local church missionaries, so that you can be effective in ministry and have a common goal to make dedicated disciples. Thank you so much for joining us here today, and we'll catch you next time. Take care.
The CSRM podcast is a production of CSRM and their production house, Overwhelming Victory. Dr. Greg Linville is the executive producer, and Scott Stedman is the associate producer and editor. To learn more about CSRM, visit csrm.org. For more information about Overwhelming Victory, visit overwhelmingvictory.org. The CSRM podcast is the flagship member of the podcast network Overwhelming Victory Radio. For more information on Overwhelming Victory Radio, or to listen to our partner podcasts, visit overwhelmingvictory.org/OV Radio. For CSRM Podcasts, I'm Mike Maloney. Have a blessed day.